So, not about which football clubs would you probably talk about then?
So, when I was little, I always used to watch, and I remember watching Man City in black and white. And it was the famous Man City of the 60s. So it was Rodney Marsh, Matt Summerby, Colin Bell, as some of the names. There were others, but there's the names I remember. But Dad also, around about that kind of time, so before Gareth was born, so before 1975, had a Sunday League football team. So it was a pub team, and they were, well, one of the guys I remember, because I had a bit of a thing for him as a little kid. He was a fireman. And they all used to come to our house to talk about tactics and stuff. So it was the King Edward, or it was the Guide Conservative Club, can't remember, but it was, there's only like a really small area where that was. And they used to play football every Sunday at a place called Pleasington.
Is that a common ground?
Yeah, so there were loads of teams that would be there. And me and Mum used to go and watch from the sideline.
What type of things were at the ground? Like what facilities?
So there was a little, there was the changing rooms, and since then, because it's still used for that, the Sunday League teams and community teams and pub teams to come together and play at the weekend, and people just, because there's no cost, so people come and watch. And now there are places to eat, burger vans and ice cream, coffee, but they're more like your mobile kind of thing. But there's been a little changing room that's been there for as long as I can ever remember.
But would you say that there's not really been that much shelter yet? People still come together?
Yes.
Were there even like small shelters, like a bus stop?
No.
Shelter?
People use their cars as shelters.
And they watch from the car.
Yeah, because it was literally your pitch were lined up, and then there's a row where you can park facing.
Yeah.
So you use your car as your shelter.
Going back to the Manchester City stuff.
Yes.
Sort of staying on the Sunday League team. It was a pub team.
It was a pub team, and they used to have meetings at our house, but they'd also have meetings and events at the pub.
So when you say events, is that mostly drinking or eating as well?
And eating, yeah, because they quite often pies.
Pies are a big thing.
Pies are a big northern thing, yeah. And that was all served at the pub. Or it might be, if there'd have been something, it would have been a hot pot or...
Yeah.
But I remember watching football on the telly, and then Jane, when I met Jane, her mum and dad were mad Man City, and still are Man City fans, and I used to go with them, and that was when it was Main Road. So Grandad's stick was, family were from Manchester, but they were divided when it came to football.
Yeah.
So his brother and his dad were United. And Grandad was City. don't know if his sister was football.
Football fan.
But that was in the 50s, because Uncle Ted gave me a load of programmes from the Busby Babe era.
Yeah, so family is what got you into football.
Oh, I've only loved football because of my dad.
But has it gone further than that? Like, would you say, obviously family is what got you into football, but has that extended on to, like, how, what's it called? Is it like something that you talk about with friends, even like to a small extent? I know we talk about it as family as well, because that's.
I feel a connection to you
because
when you're in Preston and you and I are watching a match together, and we, even though you're slightly behind on the timing, we can like message each other.
Yeah.
So I still feel like I've got my connection, but I really have had a strong connection with football, but not necessarily in a wider community. I think it was more a family community. But when I went to City, that was the first, even though I lived in Blackburn, that was the first proper match I ever went to of a big ground, and that was Main Road, and it was the Kippax, and that just blew me away.
Why? What was the thing that blew you away?
The energy
from the people,
from the fans. Yeah.
Do you think being in that stadium, was it stands as well, not sitting?
It was stands, yeah.
Do you think that amplified it? The fact that you.
Oh yeah.
Did you feel more on top of the game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't forget as well. I've been to United, and when I went to United, it felt enormous. The first few times I went, it felt immense. And that was in the 90s when Beckham, Scholes, the Nevilles, and they...
It's more commercial.
Well, they were closer because...
Closer in that sense.
They parked their cars and they stepped 20 steps into the ground. Now it's all different. But they were accessible. So there was loads of fans milling around. And there were fans from everywhere, all over the world. I had a photo with David Beckham, don't you know? But you're in awe of the place and the outside of it and the statues and the connection of it. And there was all sorts of food available. There's burger vans and chippies and people walking and talking and eating. But when you got in the ground, compared to what I'd felt like in the City stand, because obviously by then I'd converted to being a red, it felt more energetic.
Yeah.
Because it was bigger.
There were more people.
Yeah, and the first time I ever went back to City, when they'd moved to the Etihad, it felt lifeless, because at that particular point, City were on they'd been down.
Yeah, they weren't on their best.
They'd come back up and the stands were empty. And I remember somebody he actually works at UA92 now, but he's an absolute lifelong City supporter, and he took a photo when I worked at the bank of the stand. And he went, "Where are they all now?" Because he'd gone when it was the Kippax and Main Road and everything. And then he'd gone when it was the Etihad. But because they were falling out of favour, they weren't on the ascendancy. And there was that. It was lifeless.
But now they've had that cash injection and they've come up. Do you think there's a new generation of City fans? Because myself as a Manchester United supporter, I don't like those kind of City fans, because your first instinct is, like, I don't hate them, but I just think glory hunters,
But you've always
they're only
had that.
there. Yeah, they're only there because of the money. But then, obviously, really, my connection from football comes from you, which comes from your dad, my granddad. But I see, when I think of Manchester City, then I think of the old Manchester City and how most of our family on that side are supporters as well.
And the first time I ever went the Kop, I went to Liverpool, and I felt the same energy that I'd felt when, and that's small in comparison. It feels closer. It does feel like a community.
Yeah.
I mean, it's massive in terms of numbers, and I've been to Everton's ground.
Yeah.
And dug out and walked up, and that was a bit different because it was about. I remember going and thinking, this is tiny in comparison to United.
But is there not a positive aspect on those small spaces in a social sense, like
definitely.
The fact that they're tiny?
You feel really close to the play. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Everton's, I was like, I'd walked out the dugout, sort of where the players come up. I thought, blooming heck, 2 steps and you're in. So it did feel like you were close, you were on top of it, you were part of it.
A lot of people, when talking about football clubs, they will say we, or like our, using inclusive nouns, including themselves in the team.
Yeah.
And do you think that stadium layout, especially when stands were more of a thing, do you think that added to that?
Yeah, because literally, at the time when the stands went and seats came in, and I think there was a bit of a kerfuffle at United with Fergie telling everybody to sit down, because everybody's instinctive reaction, the minute, and it wasn't the minute of play, it was the minute people come out, is to stand up. And then if it went a bit quieter, they'd sit down. But the minute play came anywhere near you, you'd stand. So there was this. It wasn't a Mexican way, but it was this motion of stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down.
Responsive to the actual game. And would you say that people would stand up at the same time?
Yeah.
It's kind of a hive mind thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It was very sheepish.
In terms of food, started like the lower end of the tables and less commercial football clubs like Blackburn and maybe City in the old days, but also when you watch Grandad play football. What type of food amenities were there? Like,
it was hot dogs, burgers, chippies, because chippies are all over the northwest. Blackburn was a pie shop. There's a really strongly connected, been there for years, quite old fashioned to look at.
Yeah.
Even now, going back now. But it was one of that you had to have a Lever Brother pie.
What's that, sorry?
You had to have a Lever's pie. Because the shop was called Lever's.
Yeah.
The name Lever, Lever.
Yeah. Was that part of the club?
No.
Or was it just next to it?
It was opposite. It was literally the Blackburn Rovers on one side of the road and that was on the other. And when Rovers, Blackburn Rovers as was quite an old, when I was growing up, it was quite an old ground. And Jack Walker, who was famous in Blackburn, became the manager and completely transformed, and that's when they won the thing. So even though Grandad was a City supporter, he used to go and watch Rovers because it was a thing that him and my mum used to do.
Yeah.
And they were season ticket holders. My cousins went to watch Rovers. My aunt and My uncle went to watch Rovers.
Mm.
Loads of people from school went to watch Rovers. I actually ended up going on dates to Rovers. I got taken on a date to Rovers a couple of times. That's probably the most times I went. I didn't really go to watch. I went with Jane and Alan a few times.
So the season ticket at Rovers, who was that? That was Grandad.
Grandad and Nanny Frida.
Yeah. Did they make friends with people there, do you think?
Well,
because
Gareth's friend, Bimo, his dad was the director of football at Blackburn Rovers. So Blackburn Rovers in Blackburn and Darwin is really strongly followed by the local community.
Yeah.
There's not that many people outside of Blackburn
that support Blackburn.
That support, not then.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't in the ascendancy. And then Tim Flowers, I went to school with somebody who played for Blackburn Rovers.
Mm.
So Tim Flowers, Colin Hendry was captain, Shearer was there, that's when they won. And that sort of obviously increased the popularity. They stripped and bought a load of their, because they were very terraced houses were around, so it was that archetypal 1900s football ground surrounded by terraced houses, very closely knit terraced houses. They actually found the body of one of the lads from my year at school. When they purchased the houses around, he'd been put under the garden slabs.
Yeah.
He'd been killed he'd been murdered by his girlfriend's dad.
Yeah.
So that's the way football grounds were then. It's like the Liverpool and Everton back then.
They're immersed in the community.
They are terraced houses around. It's
they're in residential
fundamental
areas, aren't they?
Fundamental part of that local community. And in a lot of places, though, because Mum was an estate agent, those people who lived in those houses were lifelong fans.
Yeah.
Whether it's Liverpool, Everton, Blackburn or Man City, as was then.
Going back to food, do you think...
Sorry.
I think there's what is the difference in the spaces of these food places? Like going from the ones that are on the way for people going there, the ones that are right by the stadium and the ones that are in the stadium. Because my assumption is that most of these quick food places like Chippies and takeaways, they'd be quite small because people would pop in, the friends or family would stay out, they'd order the whole thing and eat it on the way or on the way back. Yeah. Is that archetypal?
I think from what I've seen, the ones closest to the ground, so actually probably in the footprint of the ground on the outside, are the burger vans, the speedy, made on site. It might have changed slightly over time, but it's predominantly burger, hot dog kind of thing. And then close by, I can't remember City Old Ground, and I can't really remember much about the Etihad now. Oh, there's a chippy right opposite Etihad, which is really good. And it's got a very small communal space. It is literally queue in, get out.
Yeah.
And then United's got a good couple of chippies close by. But they are rammed. Yeah. Absolutely rammed. Every time I've been, I've never actually gone in because they're so full.
Yeah.
But there are more because it's...
Sorry, what is the type of atmosphere that you'd say, especially on a match day, that those places have?
Beforehand, it's all joy, it's happiness.
Yeah.
There's a lot of conversation around who's he going to play, who's playing, who isn't, who's injured, who's not on form, who's been in the press, how many games, what did we do last time against this lot. So it in the same way it would be if you went to the pub with a load of mates.
Yeah.
Your topic that way is football.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're eating and walking because there's not normally places to sit with. So and then afterwards, I think I've not seen them as busy afterwards. But I suppose it depends on when kick-off is.
If it's an earlier kick-off, it's probably...
Yeah, and if it's an earlier kick-off, you get a lot of the pubs around which will close because they won't want drinking.
You said about how conversations around tactics and stuff will happen with the fans in those spaces. Do you think that people would stay to their groups? To say, if you went with your family, would you stay with your family, or would...
Oh, yeah.
They wouldn't really...
No, they'd stay with the people they've gone with, but then they might meet others.
Yeah.
Because the other thing about season ticket holders is...
They're always there.
They're always there, so they've then become friends of the people around. And I remember there was a woman... I think there's a few clubs where they've got characters that have been there for forever.
Yeah.
And they actually become
more
more when they've passed.
Yeah.
So Kathy was for Man United, and there was Helen the Bell, I remember, for City, and she used to be right on the touch line, virtually, the first row of seats, and she used to ring a bell. You remember, like a school bell?
Yeah.
She'd ring this bloody bell.
And
she would just call Helen the Bell. So, and I even, like, afterwards, when I was more sort of United at this point, and that was predominantly because Sky got the rights to TV and more football was then shown on telly. I was living down south. So I got to watch football on telly. I couldn't go quite as often. So for me then, it was the main clubs that were on then were
bigger ones.
Was United.
Yeah. Would you say that the changing of TV rights and stuff, obviously there's some rules with football, like certain games not being shown on TV to sort of preserve the fan attendance, but would you say that that's had an effect on the atmosphere and the people going? Do you think it's become more of a tourist
I do think...
watch?
I think when I worked in Liverpool, you always knew when it was a Liverpool at home because it was full of Scandinavians and Irish and full of tourists, basically, who'd come over to watch the match. So it was a real special occasion for them to come over, and they came over in groups. Never had any problems, but you just knew that Liverpool were playing. And then I've been to United games when they've had, because they've got a big Asian, East Asian community, and they go and play over there in the summer and all that kind of stuff. So you get a lot of Asians coming over to watch the matches. And that was every time I went. I mean, I didn't go loads, but every time I went, you could tell there were the tourist travellers.
Yeah. I think I might be done.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there anything else you can think of in terms of the food in the spaces of football grounds and like the takeaways and stuff? Whether it's the actual places themselves or the places in between.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think. I went to watch Darwin FC, and again that was a bit like going to watch my dad's team at Pleasanton. They were supposed to be a really minor league, part-time players. Accrington Stanley was obviously famous for an advert on telly about milk. But they were all... I don't ever remember those kind of grounds having a food connection.
The smaller ones.
Yeah, it was more. There would have been there was a pub on the way to Darwin. I don't remember a pub on the way to the other place, but they were a pub team.
Yeah.
So they'd go back to the pub afterwards, and if it was a Saturday or a Sunday, it was like everybody went back to the pub, had a couple of pints, and then went home. And that's where they dissected everything. So it's almost where they had the team talk rather than the fans being involved in it. But there was no facilities.
Yeah. I think I've got one more question actually. In terms of travelling to games, how do you think that has encouraged in your experience? How do you think it's encouraged interaction with people, whether it's driving, walking, getting a bus, public transport, that kind of thing?
I don't think the transport has, because I live so far away from the places I would go to watch football. But I think for those people who live closer by, it's got a better connection because they live closer by, so they've got that whole quite a long walk. Probably I park as close as I can to the ground, and I've got 5 minutes to the ground, and I'm usually there with whoever. Like if I'm going with you, it'd be you and I walking together. We don't really and haven't really interacted with anybody around us apart from when the song goes up, the chants, and that's when, if you know the words, you become part of the group. Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you.